the great crystal column and speak in a single word. Giant rings creak to life, building speed, setting arrays of carved draconic mouths aglow and sending tremors through the platform beneath you. The entire room shakes now with the force of the accelerating machine all around, drowned out by its deep, deafening thrum. Brilliant tendrils of light arc outward from the pillar in all directions as you look over your shoulder to see them engulfing the crowd, burning them brightly like hot iron. One by one, the tendrils disappear, leaving ashen effigies where people once stood. Many of them disintegrating into gray heaps under the stress of the tremors. You look above to the edge of pillar, and a glowing spherical mass has begun to collapse atop the column where the arcs converge. It grows and pulses, translucent and bulbous, like some immense chrysalis suspended in slow rotation, as though it were being spun from the arcs of light. When the last arc disappears, the spectral mass hangs a moment, no longer rotating, so bright you must shield your eyes from an outstretched hand, and it seems to you as though it is looking at you. You bow your head in acknowledgement and look back up to see it melt into the pillars like warm candle wax. The pillar flares with a flash of light, bright as the sun itself, then fades to darkness. The machine slows down at an abrupt halt, and when the last echo of its grinding cogs has passed, the chamber is still, and you are alone. From all sides, reality begins to bleed in through the memory, and you find yourself in your own skin once more, looking down at Thales' lifeless body. You sense a listlessness in Thales' soul, an overwhelming fatigue that hinders its immediate escape and makes it vulnerable to manipulation. You feel as though your victory has given you some kind of hold over it, and you are able to do with it as you please. Destroy all memories contained within your memory makes you a slave to your own perhaps. It can't be undone, but it can be forgotten. All trouble. Let's see. Banish his soul to breath Amen. There can be no forgiveness for your deeds, only justice. You shall escape judgment no longer.
To apply the teachings of Durance would more immediately satisfy the cravings in my bones. But this is the stronger lesson, for his soul is already marked by his own hand.
You regard Theo's soul still and subdued, and your pronouncement seems to empower your spirit. Your will seems to you now a thick chain, and you wind it around Thales, constraining all movement, eliminating any possibility that means of resistance. You call to mind the eternal prison, the vast empty cavern, and its cell of Adra, vacated by souls that chose to betray themselves in order to escape an infinity abyss of hopeless self-reflection. You choose a vacant pillar and pour your subconscious into it, creating a perfect, inescapable hollow with space for one. Now you gather up Thales' soul and bear it into the pillar like some bodiless jailer conjured by justice itself. You can feel its resistance now, the abject terror radiating from it. But your bindings will not be broken. When at last it is sealed away and you begin to recede back to your center, you could almost swear you hear a distant wordless cry for mercy. In the stillness that follows, a single word echoes through your mind, a word you spoke when you were one with Thales in an ancient memory. You realize it is the word that activates the machine.
Yep.
That about sums it up. Yep. As you approach the machine, the path underfoot suddenly changes to a cobbled road. If you didn't experience visions like that already in entire Evron, you'd be tempted to believe that the machine had sucked you into it and deposited you in the middle of nowhere. The sun blazes overhead, and the rolling meadows and thick forests of either side of the road could be anywhere in the dire wood. A shrill crackle turns your head. Standing next to you is a malnourished man clad in a threadbare loincloth and manacles. His entire body is stripped with lash marks, and there are scarred pits where his nose and ears should be. He stinks of stale sweat and unwashed filth. You notice someone wandering down the road, but the figure's back is to you. The scarred slave has your attention for now.
You know the bitterness of servitude, Watcher. The sting of the lash on your back, and scalding rage in your chest as you watch your masters grow fat on your toils. Oil and wine dribbling down their chins while blood runs from yours. You have labored at the pleasure of others. That shriveled hag in Hadrat House, those pompous dear wooden zealots, the wretched tribesmen playing out their fantasies of grandeur. And then you cowered and knelt before the gods themselves, begging one paltry favor and receiving riddles and visions in response. And now the gods give you orders and commands, even while you set out to fix what they cannot. Yet what have they offered you?
I get the feeling this is his way of giving you new orders on behalf of his own master. Be careful.
The exiled queen is not an ungrateful patron. Finish the work Theos began. Strengthen Woodica with these souls and allow her to become the most powerful of all the gods, with you as her favored.
I've been working against Boudica this whole time. Why would you thank me now after I've defeated her most loyal servant? Loyal and weak, Theos proved his inadequacy when he failed to anticipate you. A plan exposed is worse than none at all. But you have proven resourceful, equal to the schemes of gods. Boudica has a long memory, Watcher, for both friends and foes, and she keeps her oath. What do you mean by her favored? The receipt of Boudica's blessing. She has always had a place for mortals of particular merit. If you help her now, she will become the most powerful of all gods, and you will be the one who made her so. Think of the lifetimes of reward you will reap. The only reward I wish is the joy of pulling bloody shards from her broken crown from my staff when I have finished with her trial. So says your companion who's been abandoned by his own god. Do you really trust him to make alliances for you? Hoping Modica would mean that the secrets of the gods stay hidden. Safely hidden, yes, from the violent overlords who would cease to fear punishment in the next life, from the heavy-handed masters who would answer to no one. The world needs some schemes, or are the souls of Kith so pure that you would snap the tennis threads that bind society? And Theos makes a better overlord. This one is the god of slaves. What would he have left if the world were unchained from his mistress' lies? I won't help you.
You say that now, but when you're standing in front of the machine, considering the lifetimes and the powers that await you, we'll see what you do.
Speak the command to activate the machine. Return the souls to the bodies they were intended for.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Theos used to enter Sun and Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Theos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Deerwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the souls diverted by Theos were guided back to the vessels originally meant for them. For the first time, parents of Hollowborn children woke to the cries of their infants and looked into their eyes to see them staring back. People fell to their knees where they stood, thanking Helia or Mogren, or even Aethys for their forgiveness of whatever guilt they felt they bore. But for all the relief that had come to some parents, others only found new grief. For many thousands of Hollowborn had died during Wideone's legacy, many by their parents' own hands. For those children, there would be no homecoming. Yet the last Hollow birth was in the past now, and those parents willing to risk trying for a new child were frequently rewarded, often with twins. Many felt they saw Helia's hand in it, and the year would be remembered as the year of Helia's splendor. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Deerwooden standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But once the dozens had regrouped in the wake of the riots, they quickly put an end to the criminal activity, patrolling the streets in droves and administering their brand of law on any perceived offenders. They also took the opportunity to depose the weakened Knights of the Crucible from their position of authority, branding them traitors to the people for their actions during the riots. Whatever knights weren't stoned to death in front of their keep were forced into exile. The external contingent of knights stationed at Fleetbreaker Castle would remain there, their high justice plotting the city's recapture. The dozens would soon find themselves overwhelmed by the problems of a leaderless metropolis, and in the days and months ahead, Defiance Bay remained on the brink of collapse. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been disabled, it had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night, and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident, the district would remain abandoned. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay, and few Animancers survived the first day. Many Deerwoodans took the end of Widewind's legacy as a sign, both that the gods did not approve of Animancy, and that the purging of Animancers in Defiance Bay had been enough to satisfy them. In time, their rage would subside, and a number of surviving Animancers remained in and around Defiance Bay, often taking to the wilds to practice their science without repercussions. The town of Deerford had seen the last of the cult of Scan. Dark rumors about the town's many curses quickly faded, and travelers soon returned. Abidon's renewal brought new vigor and purpose to a god long known for quiet, steady labor. Handicraft saw a revival in the Deerwood, and no smith wanted for an apprentice. Additionally, Abidon's restored interest in preservation led to redoubled efforts to survey Engwithan ruins. Animancers and craftsmen alike found much to study, but tensions with Air Glanfath rose. As for Stalwart, the Battle of Caron's Scar only strengthened their resolve to unlock the mysteries of Durgan steel and build new marvels with the White Forge. However, Stalwart's ambitions brought them into further conflict with the Raid Serens, as more and more impoverished communities gathered at the border and vowed to finish the work of the Iron Flail. It would be many generations before the region saw peace. The battle against the Eyeless left Stalwart more hostile than ever toward the ogres in its midst, and the villagers grew bolder as they grew more prosperous. After a handful of bloody skirmishes, the Flames That Whisper clan left the Russet Wood to seek a quieter, more isolated home in the White March. While many such places existed in the mountains, the crossing was treacherous, and the ogres often found themselves embattled with other clans whose territory they passed. Less than half of the Flames That Whisper survived the journey, but those that did found a haven far from Kith lands. Free from the burden of her memory, Maneha soon left the gift-bearers and resumed adventuring. Now that she had a taste for the world, she wanted to experience it anew. Maneha rediscovered her zest for battle, extravagance, and romance. She kept her gaze on the horizon, looking from one journey to another more distant, from the lover in her arms to another more fervent. Hers was a life of excitement, violence, and passion. She moved too quickly for regret to catch up with her, and she hoped only that she might outpace it in the next life as well. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every thane and earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodinians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. The Audra dragon known as the Master Below, her soul now housed in the body of the huntress Fallen Roet, passed out of Deerwood in relative anonymity, her final destination unknown, even to herself. She was last seen in the port town of Rhodes End, boarding a ship, an Audra talisman glowing about her neck. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Deerford, which, like many towns in the Deerwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Deerford soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Deerford would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Theos Ixarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Theos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Theos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the Leaden Key. With both their aims fulfilled, Khanarua bid the Watcher farewell and sailed back to his beloved Rawatai. There, he reported on his findings to the Lore College. Kana spoke of the Engwithan people, describing both their vile experiments and their inspiring accomplishments. He spoke too of the destruction of the tablet by the Leaden Key and the group's efforts to erase the Engwithan legacy from the world. Both inspiration and cautionary tales, he said, could be found in the world beyond Rawatai's borders. Kana urged his people to continue to pursue knowledge abroad so that the lessons found there might benefit Tekoa. Kana's inability to prove his theory of Engwithan influence diminished his academic standing, but his passion drew much interest from those less concerned with degrees. Kana swiftly became an influential figure in the move toward a more collaborative approach to expansion on the northern continent. In his personal life, he came to enjoy the reputation of an affable eccentric, willing to share grand and impossible secrets, along with a drink and a song. With Theos defeated and the souls released from Sun and Shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Deerwood and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. Durrance used Magrin's strength only until Theos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. The charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. In her 4-month journey back to Nositoc, Sagani found that the landscape she traveled had become strangely colorless, the food bland and unsatisfying. She watched the Deerwood, Air Glonfoth, the Valian Republics, and the lands beyond slide by with a dull sense of dread. She returned home to great celebration, yet the words of joy and congratulations rang hollow to her. Old beloved songs sounded toneless. The rituals of changing seasons became drudgery, and Sagani experienced her life back in Masuk as if in someone else's skin. So she fought to feel the worth of her actions, or at least to let her village feel them. She led ever longer and more ambitious hunts, mentoring the younger rangers who followed her. On one such expedition, her party was beset by a blizzard, and she pressed on where her companions turned back. She did not return to Masuk. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead, made no easier by your decision to bring an infant to Sun and Shadow.
Pillars of Eternity. Wow. really enjoyed that game. I had some issues with it, but overall, that was really well done. Okay, we're gonna probably start another game. I was thinking Alone in the Dark, the new one. Start this after the credits. Maybe take a short break first. These probably go for a while. I don't think anybody wants to see all of them. Speed it up a little. Give some credit to everybody who was involved in this game. All the backers. Time to watch from the beginning. You don't mean all the previous for this game, right? That I have on YouTube. Wow, that's a lot of backers. Speed this up a little. Kind of want to see if there's anything at the end. Yeah, the first few episodes. How many do I have up already? I think there's over like 120 so far on YouTube. And I have about 40 more still that I need to put up that I haven't done yet. They'll probably go up in the next 2 weeks. Week. Probably the next week. Here we go. Oh, -5.